Well, how many of you remember her back in grade school having to diagram all those sentences? Yeah, my feelings exactly. The teachers used to tell us that it was to help us learn how to write a proper sentence. I didn't believe them. I know the truth. It was some unknown academic who hated children and their parents. Yeah, look at the English major. Some people are warped. I remember the tears that were shed around our dining room table as Mom was trying to convince me there was really a reason for all of those lines and squiggles and those little things that looked like division marks. And by the time you got finished diagramming the sentence, well, you couldn't read the sentence anymore. What was the purpose? I like writing. I think I can write a fairly decent sentence. And as long as we're on the subject of writing, I have a question. If it's supposed to be a positive experience, like we're told in school, why do all the rules begin with do not? Do not end a sentence in a preposition. Do not use the same word twice in the same sentence. Do not use more than one compound sentence in a paragraph. And do not overuse punctuation such as commas, semicolons, dashes, and parentheses. Now, I like commas. They make me happy. And the only thing that makes me happier are exclamation marks. So when my high school creative writing teacher reminded me of the rule concerning commas, I suggested very nicely that if the rule was going to be applied faithfully across the board, then maybe we should examine our overuse of periods. Have you ever attempted to write a 2-page paper without the use of any comma whatsoever? I don't recommend it. Exclamation mark. That particular exercise in futility came to mind this week while I was working on the sermon. For some reason, I was having difficulty understanding why two apparently different stories were put together in the same reading. In the first lesson, Jesus condemns the scribes. They seem to be misusing their power. They seem to be on some type of an ego trip. They have forgotten why they were appointed to be scribes in the first place. Now, in the second reading, there is a widow. And she comes and she puts her money in the temple treasury. And that's the problem. That's the part that I don't understand. Do you know what the temple treasury was used for? Well, it was set up in the court of the women. You know, women weren't allowed in the main part of the temple, but they were allowed to give their money. Convenient, huh? Well, and it was up to 13 golden horns. And so as people were going in, and as the men were going into the inner court, they would drop their money into the temple treasury. And can you imagine the noise that coins made as they went into the golden horns? But there was a reason for the treasury. It was supposed to support the temple. It was supposed to buy the candles, the incense, help with the upkeep. But by Jesus' time, some of that money was being diverted to pay for the scribes and the Pharisees. So in essence, the woman gave her last bit of money to help support the very people who were exploiting her. Now, does that make sense? Well, it didn't make sense to me until I remembered a very important fact. The New Testament was originally written in Greek. Now, those of you who have been through Disciple, do you remember about the Greek? How it was written? Without punctuation. Greek has no punctuation. And so, when people began to translate it, it was up to them as to where to put the punctuation. And as I remembered that, I remembered what one of my seminary professors told us to do when we were having trouble, especially with Paul. Take out the punctuation. Because the punctuation is arbitrary. You can put it wherever it makes sense to you. Now, if you take out the commas that the NRSV puts in, or if you take out the periods that the Common English Bible puts in, you have an entirely different compound sentence. The New Revised Standard Version reads, "Beware of the scribes who like to walk around in long robes and be greeted with respect in the marketplace, and to have the best seats in the synagogue and the place of honor at banquets." The Common English Bible says, "Beware of the scribes. They walk around in long robes. They like to be greeted with respect in the marketplace. They like to have the best seats in the synagogue and places of honor at the banquets." Both of those sentences are very clear. Beware of the scribes, right? But take out the commas. Forget the periods. And what you have is, beware of the scribes who like to walk around in long robes. Are you picking up the difference? In the first two examples, beware of the scribes. The entire group of scribes are being defined as corrupt and unjust and dishonest and thieves and egomaniacs. But if you read it the other way, beware of the scribes who walk around in long robes. That's not the whole group. Is Jesus talking about the whole group, or did Jesus refer to a few corrupt scribes who happened to be making bad choices and not being called on it? I choose to believe that it's that way. Jesus isn't condemning all the scribes because all the scribes weren't corrupt. They were well-educated people. They were people who spent their lives dedicated to the temple. They were there on the Sabbath. They were there on every religious holiday. They observed the laws. They put their money in the temple treasury to support the widows. There were a few who were equally well educated, who were there every Sabbath, who put their money in the temple treasury, who observed the laws, but they simply had the facade of faith, a thin veneer covering their true motives. because for whatever reason, they had chosen to use their place of power and prestige for their own gain. They had taken God out of the center of their lives and they had put themselves squarely there. And so while it appeared as though they may be doing what they had been called to do, God knew the difference. And Jesus says, beware. Beware of those people who seem to be faithful. Watch out for them. So you're not following them, but you're following the others who are following God. Christians, how often do we put people in categories and we refuse to make exceptions? All Muslims are radicals. All poor people are lazy. All women in non-traditional occupations are feminists. All Jews are rich, and all politicians are crooks. Right? But when we categorize, we tend to demonize. And when we demonize others, we begin to cover up what we're doing ourselves. As long as they are worse than we are. Well, isn't that better? And Jesus says, watch out. Watch out for the reasons behind your own choices. It is all about choices. The scribes who Jesus warns the people against, they made their choice. When they made that choice, God wasn't the center. The woman made her choice. Now, in all honesty, her 2 cents, it wasn't worth 2 cents. It didn't do anything for the temple treasury. It couldn't support anything. And I kind of imagine that that's the way the woman had lived her life. You know, one of those invisible people. Oh, she was there every Sabbath. She was there on the holidays, and she observed the laws and the rituals, and she gave her money to the temple treasury, but nobody noticed and nobody cared. Nobody asked her opinion because she didn't count except to God. There was nothing flashy about her. She didn't have an overinflated view of herself and an underinflated position for God in her life. Like the psalmist, her heart, her soul longed after God. And that was all that was important in her life. She longed for nothing more than to serve, to worship, and to please the one who cared for her. God was the center of her life. God was her all in all. Regardless of who we are, regardless of our positions in life, we have a choice to make. Will we use what we have been given for personal gain? Or will we choose to make our lives all about God? Will we simply appear to be faithful while all the while holding back the best that we have for ourselves? Or will we be faithful and offer whatever we have, however small and insignificant it may seem, so that it can be used for the glory of God. The choice is indeed ours. But the choice we make will make all the difference to the world, to the church, and to our own individual lives. To God be the glory. And all God's children say, Amen.